There we go. So that's recording. Let's see, anything else? So feel free to put your questions in the chat as we go. I usually will see a question, but if I miss your question, if I get too carried away talking about data visualization, which is one of my favorite things, you can unmute yourself and ask questions on the microphone as well. So please do not hesitate to bring up a question anytime. I understand from Juliet, we have people in this course who have some experience with R, and we have some others who have no experience with R. Since we are focused on data visualization today, for those of you who are brand new to R, it might feel like we're going a little bit fast. And that's just because you haven't had as much experience. If you want, after we're done today, to get a little more of the introductory materials, I will put a link in the chat right now that has a video and some practice with more introductory concepts in R. So loading in data, managing your data and cleaning it, and doing some very basic statistics. And this is from a workshop I did last year. It was, also an academic Hive workshop. So you'll recognize some of the stuff in that workshop after we're done today. So I think that's it for my introduction of myself. If you want to follow along with the slides, if you don't want to be looking at your screen and trying to follow along in the R package, that link I sent you a few minutes ago, let me do it again, has a link to the slides that I'm going to go over today too. So you should be able to follow the slides there. Let's see. All right, so that's it. I've talked enough without getting to R, so let me share my screen. And can everybody see that? If you can, if you just put your thumb up or put something in the chat so I know that everybody's seeing this. Great. Okay. Just always want to make sure before I start talking that everybody can see it. Cool. So hopefully you have had time to download R and RStudio and the materials for today. If you have not, you'll want to click that link that ends in 2022. And that will take you to the materials for today, which I'm showing on the screen right now. This has a bunch of files listed here at the top. It includes the data that we're going to use. It includes some sample code that we're going to use. It includes the code book for the data that we're going to use. And then a couple of files that are just kind of R files that you don't need to really worry about. They're just in there to kind of hold everything together. So this is everything we're going to use today. You'll need to follow these instructions starting here on step 1 to install R and RStudio. And then on step 3, follow the instructions to download these workshop files. And basically what you're going to be doing is just clicking on this green button here, downloading to zip, and that'll download the whole folder full of files. And you can just, if you're on a PC, you can just unzip that. If you're on a Mac, it will unzip itself if your Mac is anything like mine. So if you haven't done that yet, that's something to get started on right now. All right, and so without, does anybody need a few minutes to get stuff downloaded before we jump in? I can talk about some other stuff if there are people working on downloading. You can put it in the private chat if you don't want everybody to know you're still working on it. Okay. I have not used a Chrome laptop. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I have any advice for that. So if anybody else has experienced using a Chrome laptop, maybe let us know. There is, let's see, a way to use R completely online in the RStudio cloud. So if you are not able to run RStudio on your computer, you can go to RStudio Cloud. I'll put this link in the chat and create a free account. And then you should be able to use the cloud version of R and RStudio to follow along today. Yeah, so that's another option if your computer is being problematic, or if you have an older computer or something like that. Okay. Great. Someone else has no issues with Chrome. And while I'm sort of, taking a little pause and letting people finish downloading, I'll tell you about this really cool website. Because we're doing data visualization today, a huge part of making good graphs is choosing great colors. Colors that are good for people who are colorblind, colors that still show differences when you put them on a copier, colors that kind of pop out on a website. And if you're having trouble, kind of being creative with color, there's this website called Color Brewer 2. And it shows all kinds of colors and things, and we will use this a little bit later, but feel free to explore it. I put the link in the chat. It can tell you, all these different color combinations. If you want, you can choose ones that are diverging from different colors. You can choose ones that are more qualitative. You can ask for colorblind safe. You can ask for print friendly, photocopy safe. Looks like if you do all of those, it's a little harder to find some colors, but you can tell it how many colors you want. And you should get some good options there. So, yeah, so that's a great website to get to know if you're doing a lot of data visualization. Okay, hopefully most everybody is got stuff downloaded, and if you don't, you can keep downloading and kind of watch and follow along when you're ready. I've provided almost every bit of code that we're going to run today, so you don't really have to type in anything new except for on a couple exercises. So we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to learn today how to create basic figures. We will do bar graphs, grouped bar graphs, stacked bar graphs. We will do, I think, in histograms and maybe a little bit of box plot and scatter plots, a whole bunch of different kind of the most commonly used figures in research. So that's what we're going to do today. If you're following along, you'll need to, at this point, open RStudio. So we're on this first bullet here. Go ahead and open RStudio. And I'm going to switch over in a second to show you my RStudio. If you have not already, if you followed the instructions, you've probably already done a lot of this. If you haven't already, you'll need these 3 R packages. And for those of you who are brand new to R, an R package is a small piece of software that does something very specific in R. So R itself is just kind of a shell. It can do some things, but not that much on its own. But people all over the world have written little pieces of software that do things like create great graphs, or estimate a regression model, or do a chi-squared, or hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of things. One of the R packages I use to create these slides that you're looking at right now, called Gerringen. And so there are packages, little pieces of software that can do just about anything you want to do in R. So these are the 3 little pieces of software we're going to be using today in R. I'm not sure why my slides keep flipping, but we're going to use the Tidyverse, which is this great package by this guy named Hadley Wickham, and it's primarily useful for data management and data visualization. Then we're going to use gghalves, which is a data visualization tool that allows you to mix and match different kinds of graphs together, which is nice. And then Haven is a package for importing data that is in other formats. So we're going to be importing some data today that is in an SPSS kind of a format. We're going to use the Haven package to import that data. So what we're going to do first, oh my goodness, why are my slides doing this? Okay, so what we're going to do first is install those packages, and then we're going to open them up. And we're going to open the R Markdown file, which is our code file today, and start actually running some code. So just for this first section, I'm going to switch over to my RStudio screen so that you can see how to do these few steps. So hopefully you have RStudio open and it looks something like this. Is everybody able to open RStudio? We have a question in the chat already. So how do you decide on the tool or package, or are they defaults? You decide on the tool or package you're using depending on what you want to do. So the Tidyverse package is created specifically to do data management and data visualization. So if those are the things you want to do, you're going to use the Tidyverse package. Usually you just choose a package because it does what you want, what you're trying to do. Sometimes you'll have multiple choices, and when that's the case, you can choose the one that makes the most sense to you or works the fastest. So that might take a little kind of trial and error on your part to find that. Let's see. All right, so can I see with a thumbs up or a yes in the chat if everyone's able to open RStudio and is seeing something kind of like this on their screen? Great, thank you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Great. Ed is asking if these packages are specific to SPSS data. The Haven package is used to open SPSS data in R, but the other packages are not specific to SPSS data. Augusta, so we'll wait a second here, see if a couple of people get RStudio going. So where can we access these packages to decide on what we would prefer to use? The packages are all on something called the CRAN, and I'll put that in the chat. What I typically would do if I don't already know the package I want to use is I would Google R package like regression, and that's how you would maybe find a package for regression. So let's see, we want to make sure we get through everything today. So why don't we, I'm going to hold off on the question answering for just a little while so that we can get through some of the material. And then at the end of the day, I can answer some of these more general questions. And I can also help those who are struggling maybe a little bit with the technology. So yes, we are about to download the Tidyverse and everything right now. So once you have this open, what you're going to need to do to download the packages, to install the packages, is go up to, there's a menu at the top called Tools, Tools, Tools. Oops, that didn't go to everyone. Let's see, tools menu. Under tools, you will choose install packages. And you should get something pop up on your screen like what I have on mine. And this is where you can type in the 3 packages we're going to use today. Tidyverse is one of them. And gghalves is one of them. And Haven is one of them. And once you have them all typed in, you can either have a comma or just a space between the 3 names, and I'll put these in the chat for you. Once you have those typed in, you just hit install. And I'm not going to do it right now because it'll take my laptop a little time to install them, and I already have them. So I'm just going to leave that up there for a second. Once you hit install, you'll get a bunch of text, and some of it will be red. That is not a big deal. That is just R giving you some messages. It's not clear why they used red. It makes it look like it's an error, but it's not. So it's just doing some installation. So if you type those 3 names in here and hit install, you should get those 3 pieces of software installed to use. Once you do, you can check and see that you have them installed by going down to this bottom right corner in your software and clicking on the packages tab. And then whatever package you're looking for, you can type in this little search bar, Tidyverse, to see if you have it installed. And it looks like I have it installed right here, the Tidyverse. gghalves, I have installed, it's right here. And then Haven, I have installed, it's right here. And it gives you a little information here on what this package is going to be able to do for you. So this package, Haven, imports and exports data from SPSS, data, and SAS. So if you're working with any of those, you can import that data into R, which can help you create much better visualizations than if you stayed with SPSS, data, and SAS. In my opinion, that is the top strength of R, is its data visualization capabilities. Other software packages just don't have the kinds of flexibility you have with R. So let's go back to the slides, and actually let's do one more thing before we do. Let's open the files that we're going to be using today. So you have the software now that you're going to be using. You also need the code file that I created for you. Maybe Juliet could help out a little bit with the folks in the chat that need some technical assistance.
Of course.
Thank you. So to open the file that we're going to be using today, go down to the bottom right corner, and there's a tab called Files. And just if you're in a different tab like Packages, you'll just click on that Files tab. And you'll see yours probably looks something totally different because these are files on my computer, so they won't look the same as yours. To open what we're going to use today, click on these 3 little buttons or 3 little dots here, and then navigate to wherever you saved the materials for today. So I have them on my desktop, which I know is bad practice, but I wanted them to be easy to find. So I navigate to where I have them saved. I double click on it and hit open. And you should now see 5 little files shown in a list down here in your files browser. These are the 5 files we're going to be using today. Let's see if we can see their names a little bigger. There we go. So you have a what looks like a Word document. That's our code book. You have an SPSS data file, and you can tell it's SPSS because it's got the .sav as the file extension. Then you have this file down here at the bottom that's got a file extension RMD. This is an R markdown document, and this is where all the code is that we're going to be using today. So to open this file, you're just going to want to click on it. And then you should see in the upper left-hand corner a new file open that looks kind of, if you've never been in R before, this is going to look kind of crazy. But it's an R, it's one of the many types of R files that you can use. So let's see, this is pretty important to get everybody in this file because this is where everything we're going to do today is. And so I just want to pause here for a second and make sure everybody is getting into the file. So if you could put a thumbs up or yeah, just put a thumbs up once you get into this R Markdown file, if you would. Great. Fantastic. Couple of them. All right. All right, well, I've only seen a few thumbs up. So let's see. So if you've opened this file folder, then you should be able to click on this academic Hive data viz. That is the file we're going to be using today, and it should open in your top left corner. So I'll put the instructions in the chat. So open RStudio is the first step. Great. And use the tools menu to install packages and type there tidyverse, gghabs, and Haven. R doesn't need to be in the same file path as the zip file now. The tools menu is in the top left of your screen. If you have a PC, it's going to be kind of in the RStudio window on the top left. If you have a Mac, it'll be up separately on the top left corner of your monitor. Tools will be in the top left corner. It's one of the menu items. It's the third one from the end. I wonder if I can share my entire screen here. Let's see. Let's see the desktop. If you can see my entire desktop, the tools menu is right here in the upper left corner. So the installation of the packages shouldn't make any difference for opening the folder. Yeah, so Ahmed's got a tip for you. So if you're still trying to open this folder down here, you will need to have downloaded the materials from the website first. Okay, if you didn't do that, there won't be any materials to find. So you'll need to go back and do that. Once you have those downloaded and you're in RStudio, you should be able to click on these three little dots, and then you'll just have to navigate to wherever you downloaded and saved those files for class today. All right. How are we doing? Is everybody, people finding the documents? Great, thanks. Once you've installed the package, you don't have to do it again. It's done. So now that you've got it Tidyverse installed, you won't have to do it next time. It's kind of like when you get a new computer and maybe like it doesn't have Microsoft Word on it, you have to install it, but once it's installed, it's there and you can use it forever while you have that computer. Okay, so I'm going to actually go back to my slides. I want to make sure we get through some of this material. So if you're struggling a little bit getting everything installed and ready to go, a reminder that I'm recording this and I'm going to put it on YouTube when we're done. And so, you know, if you want to go back, and I'll also provide support via email and on Twitter if needed. So I'm going to go back to my slides and we can kind of get started with some of the materials today. All right, cool. So yeah, maybe Juliet could help confirm whether the packages have been installed, but you'll see in a second whether it's going to work. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run our first little bit of code. If you look in that RStudio window, I'm going to go back to that just for a second. You'll see at the top a word that says chunk 1. Each of these little gray areas is a code chunk. So it's a chunk of our code that I've written. And I gave it a name here so that when I'm talking to you, I can tell you to run the code in chunk 1 or run the code in chunk 2. And that'll tell you where we are in the document so that you can follow along. To run code in a code chunk, you're going to click on the little green arrow at the top right corner of that code chunk. So in this case, these are the 3 packages that we installed today. And we installed them, but we have not yet opened them. So you only have to install it one time, but you have to open it in each document where you want to use it. So to open a package, we use this library function. So you can see I've got library. So I want to open this package called Tidyverse, open this package called Haven, open this package called gghabs. Those are the 3 we're going to use today. So to run that code, to open all the packages, you're going to click this little green arrow on the top right corner. Click on that. Once in a while, you won't see the little green arrow. That means you need to close RStudio and open back up because you have a little glitch. But once you run that code, you'll see a whole bunch. It looks like it's giving you errors, but it's not. It's just giving you information, talking about, you know, when the package was developed and what else it loads and all that kind of stuff. So go ahead at this point and run chunk 1. So you're going to have those 3 software packages open so that we can use them today. So to run chunk 1, find where it says chunk 1. And then click this little green arrow on the top right corner. And that will run chunk 1. Okay. So once you have chunk 1 ready to already run, you have everything you need to start creating data visualizations. Well, I guess that's not true. We need some data, right? We don't have data yet. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to load in the data. So the data set is the Global Attitudes and Trends data set for a Pew Internet and American Life website. And I downloaded the data and I did not make a single change to the file that I downloaded. So I downloaded it directly from Pew and put it in this folder for you. So I haven't done any data management. I haven't done anything to it. It's just an SPSS data file with a bunch of information in it about global attitudes and trends. If you wanted to download it again for yourself, this is where you can find it on the Pew Research website. Christian, that's because you haven't installed the Tidyverse yet. So maybe Juliet could help you install the Tidyverse. And that's you go to the install, you go to the tools tab and go to install packages and type Tidyverse. Okay, so to import data into R, you'll have to make sure you've got all the files saved in the same folder. So if you downloaded it and unzipped it, it's all ready to go. You don't need to move anything around. And the files are all linked together by a little R file that's in the folder called participant documents.rproj. That kind of links the data and the code files together. So you don't have to worry about file paths and where things are stored and stuff like that, because it's all in the same folder. And because it's linked together by this R project file, you don't have to do anything else really. So you can see the data file probably in your RStudio, and it's called Pew Research Center Global Attitudes Spring 2019 Dataset web.save. In code chunk 2 in your R Markdown file, you should see this code that's shown on my screen here. And what you want to do is use the little green arrow at the top of code chunk 2 to go and run this code, and that will bring the data set into your RStudio. And depending on how fast your internet connection is, that might take 30 seconds or so. So let me click back and show you in my RStudio what that looks like. So here I found code chunk 2. It's got this read SPSS function. It's going to open this file from the Pew Research Center, and it's going to use this, what's called an assignment arrow, to give that data a name so that you can then work with it. So what I'm calling this data, the name I'm giving it is Global Data 2019. So if I want to run chunk 2, I'm just going to hit this little green arrow up here, boom, and it's going to take 30 seconds or so. And then it's going to appear magically up here in the top right corner in the environment. So you can see now that I have this Global Data 2019. That's what I named it right here. And it's got 38,426 people, observations, and 607 variables. And if you want to know more about this data set, this Word document that's included in the materials today is the code book. So it'll tell you all about all the questions that were asked and what people answered and things like that. All right, so let me go back to my slides. So once you have that data imported, then you can start with some visualization. The first thing you do is do some cleaning, and I'm not going to go through all this cleaning. If you want to know what all of this is, that link that I gave you at the beginning, and I'll give it to you now again, has a whole video about how to clean your data. And you can watch that, and that'll tell you what everything in this means. It looks like a ton of code right now. It's actually not that bad. It's just a bunch of recoding and choosing things. And so what you're going to want to do in your R Markdown file is go ahead and use that little green arrow at the top right to run code chunk 3. And that's just going to do all the data management for you. So it's going to use Tidyverse to clean your data set so it's ready to visualize. So let me go back to my RStudio and scroll down till you get to code chunk 3. So it says right here, chunk 3, and you go ahead and run it. and it does some stuff. And that what you see happen is over here in the corner now, I've taken that original data, that global data 2019, and I've done a bunch of stuff to it. And then I saved it using this arrow again with a new name called Global Data 2019 Clean. And you'll see that that pops up over here, Global Data 2019 Clean. So one of the things I did when I cleaned that data was I decided that my report or whatever it is I'm working on was only for these 4 countries that I'm interested in. I was interested in Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and the US. So part of this data cleaning was I narrowed that data set down to people living in those 4 countries, just because I maybe had a research question about them. And so that made my data set a little smaller. It now has 5,001 observations. The other thing I did was I chose 7 variables I was interested in. And these are the 7 variables. So I now only have 5,001 observations and 7 variables. Often it's good to do this at the beginning of an analysis so that you aren't faced with 38,000 people and 600 variables, which can just be overwhelming. So you'll get a lot more about how this is all working if you watch that video at the that I put in the chat, and Juliet just also put in the chat. It gave specific instructions on how to build this whole bunch of data management. All right. Back to the slides. So the next code chunk 4, allows you to check your work. So go ahead and run code chunk 4. And what that's going to give you is what you see on the slide, which are just some basic descriptive statistics about this little data set that you have imported and started to work on. So it's giving you, for anything in that data set that's categorical, it's giving you frequencies. For anything in that data set that's continuous, this summary function is giving you means and medians. So you can see that we have 7 variables. The first one is country. We have Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and the United States. We have a little over 1,000 people in our data set from Kenya. Oops, not sure why that keeps happening. About 995 from Nigeria, a little under 1,500 from South Africa, and about 1,500 from the United States. The second variable we have is sex, and we have male and female. Then we have an age variable, which is presumably age in years, although you could look in the code book to be sure. We've got a mean age of 39 years old, a median age of 35. There's a question in the code book called Better Gender, which asks people, who do you think in your country has a better life, men or women, or they have the same life both and equally. So there's the answers to that question. Second row here, we've got country satisfaction. Are you satisfied or dissatisfied with your country? Then we've got economic situation in your country, and ladder, which is on a scale from 0 to 10. How good is your life? How well is your life going? And so those are the questions we're going to sort of work on today with our data visualization. So if you have not run chunk 4 yet, go ahead and run chunk 4 now, and you should get something that looks like what I have up here on the screen. All right, so now that our data is all cleaned up and we've got these 5,001 observations of people living in these 4 countries that we're interested in, now we want to finally get to developing some graphics. There's a package in R called ggplot2, and it is part of the tidyverse. So when you install the tidyverse and you open the tidyverse, you got the ggplot2 package as one of the things that it's included in that. GG stands for Grammar of Graphics. So Grammar of Graphics plot 2. Graphs that are built using this software are built in layers, and I'm going to show you how that works in just a second. Basically, you'll tell in different layers what you want. So I want to use this data. I want this sort of graph. Then you'll have a layer for colors. Then you'll have a layer for other, labels and other things that are helping you format your graph. And we'll look at that in a second here. So we're going to look at bar charts to start with, because this is one of the most commonly used types of graphs in research. And for very good reason. It can show you how your data look really clearly if you have categorical variables especially. So a basic bar chart is going to start with the data set. So this is the first layer in the data set. So taking the global data 2019 clean data set. Okay, so it's showing us on the left is showing us the code, and on the right is showing us the actual data set. And I'm going through code chunk 5 right now, if you want to look at how this looks on in your file. Then we're going to use this little thing right here, which is called a pipe. You can think about this as like a pipe in your house or your apartment or wherever you are, wherever you live, wherever you work, that maybe carries water from one place to the other. So maybe it brings water in from the street and carries it from, to a faucet. So what this pipe is doing in R is carrying the data set that you put here on the left-hand side, carrying that data set through this pipe into ggplot, which is our software for creating graphics, our function for creating graphics. So once you have this data piped into ggplot, you have to tell ggplot what out of that data do I want to graph. And you tell it what you want to graph, which variables you want to graph in part of the code called the aesthetics. So that's what AES stands for. It stands for aesthetics. So you have ggplot first, and then open parentheses aesthetics. And then in the aesthetics, you have to tell R, what do you want on the x-axis? What do you want on the y-axis? What do you want for the color? All that kind of stuff. We're going to keep it real simple right now. All we want is a bar graph showing sex, so showing a bar for how many males there are and a bar for how many females there are. That's all we're going to say. We're not going to tell it about color. We're not going to tell it what to put on the y-axis, just that I want a sex on the x-axis. Then you add on another layer by using the plus sign to add on a layer. And at this point, before the plus sign, R does not know what kind of graph you want. So you have to tell it what kind of graph you want. And I want a bar graph. So I'm going to use the geom, which is short for geometry. What's the geometry of my graph? It's a bar. So a geom bar will give you a bar graph. So if you run this little bit of code, what you get is this basic bar graph. So you have sex on the x-axis, males and females, count, which is like a frequency on the y-axis. It just automatically does that for you. And then you can see you have more males than females in this particular data set. But it's, it's pretty close to even. Females just under 2,500, males just over. So this is your very basic bar chart. So let's see. I'm going to go through a few more before we have a little time for you to work on your own. And at that point, I can help a few people if you're struggling to keep up. So let's go on to the next one. So this was code chunk 5. If you haven't run it already, you know what? In yours, it actually says code chunk 10, I think, because I got rid of a few. So code chunk 10, sorry about that. Go ahead and run that code and you should get the same graph. All right. If you want to make it a little fancier, you're going to start with exactly the same thing. You're going to start with a layer that's the actual data. Then you're going to pipe it using the little pipe into ggplot. right here. Aesthetics, still we're just going to have axis be the sex variable. Then we're going to add on the geom bar, but this time we're going to fill it with a color that we chose, deep pink this time. You can, if you want to, if you're feeling brave right now and or maybe you've done some R before, you can replace that deep pink with a color that you like. You could replace it with the word blue or green or red or any kind of standard color you can think of. And then there's some fancier colors that you can find online. And go ahead and run that code chunk. It's under the heading fancy bar chart. It says in mine that it's chunk 11. So the numbering of the chunks got off a little bit, but you should be able to run that. And then after that, there's another layer that's labels, labs, labels for short. And the x-axis, I want sex as the label. On the y-axis, I want frequency as the label. And then I want this title on my bar graph. So I want it to say the sex of 5,001 participants in a survey of people from Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, and the United States. So that's the next layer, is those labels. And then I do not like this gray, oops, darn. I do not like this gray background that all the GG plots start with. Takes a lot more ink if you're printing it out. It makes it a lot busier if you're putting it in a document. So what I do is I usually add on one more layer, which is a theme. And I love this theme _ minimal. So this kind of takes that gray out of there and kind of makes your graph look a little more clean. So now we started with the same 3 lines basically that we had in that very basic bar chart before. And then we added on 2 more things. We added on labels and we added on a theme. And now you've got a bar graph that you could probably put in a research paper or a report or on a website that's pretty well formatted, pretty easy to read, and pretty flexible. So let's look at some other colors options that we might be able to work on. Sometimes you want different categories to be colored in different ways. And so let me show you how that's done. So again, you start with the layer that's the data. You send it through a pipe into ggplot. And then you have to tell R about the aesthetics. This time I want, on the x-axis, I want the sex variable, but I also want it to be filled with a color by sex. So I want each sex to be filled with a different color. So I add on that argument here. And then I add on my geom bar layer, tell R that I want a bar graph. Notice that I took the color out of here because now the color's up here, fill equals sex. Adding on the labels. And then I chose some colors with a color palette that I like. So when I want to choose colors for a graph, I use a layer, another layer. The layer is called Scale Fill Brewer. That. Scale Fill Brewer right here. And then inside that, I have to tell it what I want it filled with. And there are a bunch of palettes that you can use that are different combinations of color. And if you go out on Google and you Google palettes for R, it'll give you the name of all these palettes that you can choose from. And so I like this particular one. It's nice, bright colors. It's called Set 1. There's another one if you want to put the name of it. Oh, goodness. You want to put the name of it in here. That's called Dark 2, another good palette. Dark 2. Okay. So if you want to trade Set 1 for Dark 2, You can give that a try and run your code and see what those colors look like. I think that's a pretty nice one too. And then the last thing I did was I added that theme minimal, and something that I added to at this time was I wanted my fonts to be a little bigger. I wanted, it was a little hard for me to read. My eyes are getting older than most of your eyes are. And so when I looked at this graph, I was like, wow, those numbers on the X and Y axes are super small. People are not going to be able to read that, especially if they're on their phone, right? They can't, that's tiny little print. And so I changed what's called the base size. And so the base size is usually, I think 11 or 12 is the default. So anything you put in there that's a larger number than that is going to change all of the text to a little bit larger. It's going to keep the relative size, because so you notice that the title is a bigger font than the labels on the axes, and those are bigger than the actual numbers and labels, or numbers and categories on the axis. But all of them, every single one gets just slightly bigger when I add in that base size equals 14. So now you have a really nice looking bar chart that you could put in a report or put in a research paper, just with a few extra lines of code there. Let's see. Oh, we're getting one more super fancy bar chart, and then I'm going to show you a few tricks in our studio, and then maybe we'll take a little short break that I can help people in the chat for a few minutes. So for those of you who are following along and are just fine with everything, you can feel free to go faster. All the code you need is in there, and you can run it all and look at what it does as we go. So let's look at this last bar chart here. Taking the data, piping it into ggplot, and then I want sex on the x-axis, and I want it filled by the sex variable. And then I'm going to add on, I wanted a bar graph, so my geometry is a bar. And I'm going to add on the labels. You always have to have good labels on your figures. I'm going to add on the colors that I want. And then I'm going to change it, maybe the journal that you're submitting to, maybe the report that you've written, maybe it's in a font that has a serif type, like Times New Roman or something like that. And if you're not familiar with that, I can just go back for a second. See how the type doesn't have, it's all kind of straight lines. It doesn't have any of the little fancy things at the base of each letter. That's a sans serif, so it doesn't have serifs. If you want a serif font, you can add it in by changing the base family to serif right here. So this has changed the font that you're seeing on your plot. And then the last thing we're going to do is notice that this legend over here for sex, where it shows red for male and blue for female, is completely unnecessary. You can already see that the red bar is male and the blue bar is female. So it's automatically created when you use this fill argument, and sometimes you need it when have multiple variables in the chart. But in this case, we don't need it. It's just taking up space and making everything smaller. So we can remove it with this by adding this layer. Legend position equals none. So get rid of the legend, in other words. So if you have not run that yet, that is chunk 13. And you can go ahead and run it. And now what I have in the document is a little section called You Try It, where you can maybe copy this code and make a few changes to it and run it and see what happens. What I'm going to do is go back to my RStudio window and share just a couple things with you, and then take any questions that are in the chat for a few minutes before we move on to the next type of graph. So if you were late getting into everything and you're kind of feeling like you missed out on some stuff, there's one thing you definitely need to do first, which is to install those packages. And so to install the packages, you go to the tools menu, hit install packages, And then you have to type the 3 packages we use today, which are Tidyverse, GG Halves, and Haven. I put those in the chat. And once you do those packages and you open the document that we're using, which is this academic Hive data viz document, if you just haven't been able to follow along with running some stuff, there's a second little button here. And basically this button means run everything, all the code above where we are right now. So if you haven't, if you've got everything open, but you haven't had time to kind of follow along, you can hit that and it'll run everything above this chunk of code. So it'll bring in the data, it'll do the data management, it'll make all the graphs we've made so far. And then it brings you to this point, and then you can run from here your next code. Another thing I wanted to show you was how do you figure out what the different colors and color palettes are? So if you go to the help documentation, you can go up to this little magnifying glass, and you saw that scale fill brewer was what we use to choose our colors here. And if you kind of scroll through it, there's a place where all the palettes are listed. So here are all the different palettes that you can use right here instead of set one. So if you wanted like RDB, I bet you that is red and blue. So I could, let's see, let's try like red, yellow, green. So I could put that in here, and I can run this again, and it'll use the colors from that particular palette. Pastel 2 might be fun. So we put that in here and run it, and you'll get those colors. So these are all the palettes, and I found those by going to the help tab and typing in scale fill brewer down here. So you get a list. You could also just go to Google and type in palettes for ggplot, and it'll give you lists of palettes and colors and things like that. Let's see, anything else I need to show here? I think that's everything I wanted to show. If you want to go ahead and if you've been following along pretty well so far, why don't you go ahead and try the You Try It? And why don't we take about 6 minutes for this, and during that time I will answer questions in the chat for anybody who's stuck. So we'll come back together at about 15 after and continue on with another type of graph.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Jenny. I think you may want to pause the recording right now.
Post the recording now.
Yeah.
I can't post it right now because
No, not post. I mean to pause it.
Oh, pause it. Okay, got it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Pause. So you'll miss just a minute there, but I think you'll catch up. So we've added in better gender on the x-axis, better gender for the fill country. We've added a label for who has a better life in this country, frequency, maybe a title. Did anybody try a palette that they want us to put up here on the screen? Anybody find one in that help documentation that they tried? RDBU, great. And then base size, did anybody try a different size of font? Maybe you like really, really tiny font, so you tried a smaller one, or 12. Okay, great. Cool. So once you filled all that in, we could hit this little arrow here, and you get that this graph. So men, women, same or both equally, and then NA. Let's see. we have, yeah. So there you go. You might have tried a different palette. I kind of like those colors, although the white might be a little hard to see unless you had a darker background. Maybe if you have a white color in your graph, you might want a different theme, something that's got a darker background maybe. So this is a good way to see what the themes are that are available. If I go over here to my help documentation and I hit theme, there's a ton of different themes we could use. So here's my favorite one, theme minimal, but there's a ton of different options. So maybe we want to try theme dark. Maybe that'll be easier to see this white bar here. So there you go. So that's a little easier to see the white bar in the graph. All right, cool. Anybody else try anything that they'd like me to show up on the screen, or you want me to show anything else in particular? I think there's an NA. There was a color for NA, but it looks like there is. All right, cool. If you haven't already and you've made some changes, you might want to hit save at this point, just in case. You never know. We have thunderstorms here today, so you know, it's possible my electricity will go out at any moment. All right. Cool. So any other questions before? Yes, we're going to do that. Dr. Ajani? We are going to put percentage on each bar. So yeah, we'll do that in just a second here. Okay, I'm going to stay in my R Markdown document. The slides are available to you online, and I think it's a little easier for me to make sure everybody's on the same place if I can make edits right along with you. So I'll leave this here for now. So head down to chunk 15, and we're going to make a stacked bar plot. So far, what we've been doing is using a single categorical variable and making a bar graph that works just for one categorical variable, which is great and it's helpful. But a lot of the time you need a little more complexity in your graph. And so now we're going to look at a bar graph where you have two categorical variables. In this case, we're going to use the better gender variable, which is a variable about who has a better life in your country. Males, females are about equal. And then we're going to see how people answered that based on their sex. So do males think differently from females when you ask them who in your country has a better life? And so we'll use a stacked bar plot to show this. It's really similar to what you've been doing so far. A few new things to go through. So we've got the global data clean. This is the data you've cleaned up. We're going to send it through a pipe, and you know, we have this NA up here, which wasn't really very helpful. There's no bar there, and you can't really, like, why is it even there? So we're going to get rid of that first before we make the graph. So we're going to drop the NA values of the better gender variable. And then we're going to send that through the pipe again. So we've taken this data, we've dropped anybody who has a missing value for better gender. We send it through the pipe again into ggplot2. And we're going to set up the aesthetics. And this time we're going to use better gender on the x-axis. So who has a better life is going to be on the x-axis. And then the bars are going to be filled with color based on the participant's sex who answered the question. And that'll become more clear when we run the code. Then we want to add on the geometry, which is a bar graph. Add on the labels. So who has better life is now on the x-axis. If you forget what you put on the x-axis, you can come back up here on the x-axis. Oh, look, I put better gender on here. So who has a better life is on the x-axis. Y-axis is still frequency. And then it's filled by sex, but that's not in the labels right now. So X is who has a better life, Y is frequency, title, who has a better life by sex according to 5,001 participants. So You always want to make sure your title has the sample size in it, the year the data were collected, and then anything else people would need to know to be able to read your graph easily. Add on my colors, so that it's going to be filled by the sex variable. So what colors do I want it filled with? I'm going to use this paired palette, which you find over here in this list. Theme minimal, we've already talked about. Base size equals 12. Base family, I'm using a different kind of font now. So before I was using serif font, now I'm going to use mono font. So this is going to give you a stacked bar graph. If I hit the little arrow, now I get this stacked bar graph. So the color is the sex of the participant who answered the question, males or females. And then here's the answer to their question, who has a better life, men, women, or same, both equally. So it looks like men and women all together think men have a better life. We don't know what country all the participants are from this graph, but then women, and these were the respondents, and then same, both equally here. So more men having better lives than women, and then quite a few said same equally. And you can see now the difference in the font. This is more of a mono, more of a single, each letter takes up the same amount of space. So it looks more like an old-fashioned typewriter, if any of you have ever worked on that. You can go back up here and look at the font, and it's a little different look. Wait, any questions on that one? What function makes plotting the stacked bar possible? This is just the default for geom bar when you have two categorical variables like this. So yeah, there's no additional function. It's just the default that R uses when it sees, okay, I want this on the x-axis and I want the color to be this other categorical variable, and it's got to be a bar graph of some sort. So that's, yeah, it's the same function we've been using, just one new option. The problem with a stacked bar graph is a lot like the problem with a pie chart. It's really hard to tell the relative difference in the amount of people in each of these bars. So like, what's bigger here, the dark blue or the light blue? They look really close to the same, but maybe one of them is more than the other. Well, which one's bigger here? We don't know. It's really hard to tell the relative difference. And so typically what people will do is, instead of stacked like this, they will use what's called a grouped bar plot, which is where you put the two different groups or the however many groups side by side. And so Christian, I don't, I'm not sure I know why that would happen. What I would do if I were you is hit this little arrow right here. And it'll run everything above. It sounds like maybe it's just a glitch because that's a weird error. But hit this to run everything above and then try it again. It's just R having a minor freak out, which happens to all of us. So. But if that's not it, well, we can look at that at the end here. Great, so a grouped bar plot, only one change. So all this, everything here stays the same. The only thing different for grouped is that I have to tell R, I don't want it stacked on top of each other. I want the colors side by side, so it can tell the relative difference between the sizes of the different groups. So everything else here is the same. The only other thing I changed was I changed that mono back to a serif, but I can leave that as mono, just so that it looks the same as the one above it. So taking the data, sending it through the pipe, dropping the missing values for better gender, sending it now this new cleaner version through the pipe again into ggplot. We're going to set the aesthetics. X-axis is going to be better gender. The fill color is sex. I'll do the geometry as a bar graph, but this time we're adding position equals dodge. And I'm not 100% sure where that word came from. But how I try to think of it is the two colors are trying to dodge each other. So they're, instead of being stacked on one on top of the other, they're side by side. Then everything else is the same. The labels, I have added here, since the fill color is sex, I added fill equals survey participant sex. You see up here, this just says sex, which might be confusing with this who has a better life answer. So I made it a little more explicit that it was the sex of the person answering the question. Everything else is about the same. So let's run it and see what happens. Yeah, so now you can see that instead of being up on one on top of the other, which if you like that, great, it's fine. You can see them side by side. So now you can tell that males and females have pretty much the same view, that men have a better life. It's almost the exact same number of men and women, males and females here answering the question. For women, more males thought women have a better life than women. Females didn't tend to think as much that women had a better life. Same, both equally, more males thought that than females. Yeah. Okay, cool. Question on that one. So the stuff we added were just this position equals dodge and this fill. I added a label here, so survey participant sex, to make that a little more clear. Okay. All right, got another one to try, creating a grouped bar plot. So why doesn't everybody take a few minutes, take 5 minutes to try and fill this out as much as possible, and then let's fill it out together as a group. And while you're doing that, if you want to mute me, I'll answer questions if people are stuck. So Ahmed, so piping works with any package that's affiliated with the tidyverse. Not with all packages though. Packages that are written in base R don't use the pipe. Let's see, and then why are the graphs not found in plots? The reason for that is that this document is called an R Markdown document, and it integrates the R code with the output. If you use the document instead of RMD up here for R Markdown, if you use a plain R code document, the plots would come out over here. So for example, if I took this code and I just ran it as regular code, not in an R Markdown document. So if I just pasted it down here and ran it, then this should come up in the plots. So now it's come up in the plots. So that's just due to the type of file that I'm using. Yeah, great. And let's see, somebody wants to see chunk 14. So chunk 14 is there. So chunk 15 and 16 are the ones that are different. So 15 has nothing in the geom bar, and that results in this stacked plot. But if you add this position equals dodge into the geom bar, that'll result in the plot being side by side. So we got stacked versus side by side. And you wanted to see 14 as well. Shiny. that how you say it? 14, the difference is that we have the same variable that's both on the x-axis and also on the fill. So when you get to 15, you have better gender on the x-axis and sex on the fill. So you have two different variables going on in chunk 15, just one variable in chunk 14. Any other questions? Christian, did that work to rerun everything?
No, I'm still getting the error message for the 14, but for the remaining, it's working.
Okay.
Mhm.
So 14 is not running.
Yeah.
Okay, here, I'm going to put my code in the chat. And if you want to replace your chunk 14 code with mine,
All right.
see if that works.
Okay.
I'm guessing that something like when you typed it in, maybe the comma got misplaced or something got spelled slightly different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to try again. Okay. Oh yeah, it's working now.
Great. Yeah, so if anybody else had trouble with chunk 14, you can copy and paste the code I put in the chat. All right, cool. So let's fill this one in together. This chunk 17. So what do we want to do first? Like so see these line numbers over here on the left? I'm going to refer to those. On line 205, when we're dropping NA, which drops missing values, what do we want to put in the parentheses there? If you're following along with the bullets, there's a drop in missing values. So the NA is missing value. So we put country satisfaction in here. So if you look code book at all today or before a class, you might have read this is like, how satisfied are you with your country? Or are you satisfied with your country? So we're going to drop the missing values for that. Now we're going to add country satisfaction as the x-axis and sex as the fill color. So x-axis is right here. So we'll have the country, oops. country satisfaction there, and then the fill color is the sex variable. And use that position equals Dodge, and then we'll have that labels again. So sometimes when I get here, I'm like, I can't even remember which variable I put on the X and which on the Y and which for the color and all that. So I can go back up here to this layer where I added the variables, and so now I can remind myself that on the X-axis is the country satisfaction variable. So I would add in here country satisfaction, or however you want to label it based on that variable. Y is frequency. We're gonna get to how to do percent in a minute. Title is gonna be some long country satisfaction by sex. And I want to take a new line. In 2019, for males and females, and you probably want to add like in these 4 countries and all that kind of stuff. But I'll just leave it short for now. And then fill, we're filling it by sex, so we would want to put that here maybe as a label, participant sex. And then color. Let's see, we can figure out a color by going over here and looking at scale, fill, brewer. Anybody have a color they want to see? On this list? Dark 2, yeah, that's one of my favorites. Dark 2. And then theme. Yeah, if you have a single color, you would probably put that up a little higher. You want to use one of the options here. What's it for? Because you need multiple colors. Did anybody try a different theme? Any of these themes? Theme classic. Okay. Classic. All right. So let me put this in the chat. Well, maybe I should make sure it runs first, huh? Okay, let's run it first. There it is. Let me put this in the chat. All right, so what you got was, so we have a new set of colors. This is from the Dark 2 color palette that we found here in this list somewhere, Dark 2. We have a different theme. I mean, it looks very different to me. It's just got the 2 axes and there's really nothing going on behind it. It's very kind of clean looking graph. It looks like something you'd see in maybe a medical journal, this format. So that if you're publishing a lot in medical journals, that might be a good option for you. Everything else looks about the same as what we've been seeing. So if you want to read the graph, it looks like when people were asked whether they're satisfied with their country, more males said they were than females, but also more males than the dissatisfied. So we probably just have a bigger sample of males in this group. And then here's another option if you want to look at another way to do it. So you can got a little longer title and stuff. And that was just paired as the palette. Yeah, little extra typing for the labels for the x-axis and things. So a couple of different ways to make the same graph. Okay, so questions on that before we're gonna get to the group percentages now, which is gonna take a little brain work on everybody's part. So yeah, so if you're still playing around with some of the earlier graphs, you might want to stop and just pay attention to the next couple of minutes on a slide. All right, so I'm gonna move from here over to the slides. Before I do, does anybody want me to put any of this code in the chat or have any questions on these graphs? Okay, so I'm going to move over to my slides because I think they show better what we're going to do on this next part. Oh, here's something that I hadn't shown you. If you have an NA, if you have a bar for NA and it's not showing up as a color, you can set it to a certain color. And so this is in the slides, so you can go back and take a look at it. Let's get to look at all we've done. Okay, here's the group percentages. So the frequencies are fine, but as you might have noticed, it really depends on the size of the sample for how many people are in each group and the frequencies. And so if you have a sample where there are exactly the same number of males and females, maybe it doesn't really matter. But if your sample has more of one than the other, you might want to have a graph that shows the percentage within each group that answered in each way. And so to do that, you're going to have to do a little data management before you create your graph. So this is part of the Tidyverse, this data management. And if Tidyverse is brand new, if the pipes and stuff are brand new to you today, you probably want to go and watch that video from last year, and I'll put this in the chat again, that talks a lot more about the data management stuff. But I'll walk you through it. Hopefully the way the slide is set up will help a little bit. So let's look at what we've got here. So we've got, this is our data set. We've been using it all along. It hasn't changed. Here it is kind of shown with like country is here. So you see, so country is here. So you see all the countries, sex is the second column, age is a third, better gender, country satisfaction. You should, some of these should sound like familiar variables because we've been working with them today. We're going to pipe that into a function called group by. So I'm going to group the data by country satisfaction and by sex. So you can see now in the country satisfaction, you've got all the dissatisfieds grouped together here and then the satisfieds. Once you've grouped it by country satisfaction and sex, you'll send it through the pipe again to count how many people are in each of those groups. So that's doing a little data management here. It's saying satisfied male, people who were satisfied with their country and were also male. There were 745 of them in this data set. People who were satisfied with their country and were also female, there were 625 in our data set. Those who were dissatisfied and were male, there were 1,783. Those were dissatisfied and female, 1,748. Missing value, 64 males, missing value, 36 females. So this is taking those groups, grouped by country satisfaction first, satisfied, dissatisfied, and then by sex, male, female, male, female. And then counting how many people are in each group. And this is used to create the percents. I'm going to pipe that. Then you're going to group by again. And this is what you really want to pay attention to if you're taking notes or if you just want to file this in your brain, because it took me a very long time to remember this. whatever you put in this line, this second group by, is the variable that you want to add up to 100%. So out of all of the people who said country satisfaction, out of all the people in each category of country satisfaction, what percent were male and what percent were female? So out of everybody who was satisfied with their country, what percent were male and what percent were female? Of everybody who was dissatisfied, what were male and what were female? And then you're going to do send it through a pipe into a function called mutate. Mutate is a function that creates new variables for you, or you use to create new variables. It doesn't actually do it unless you tell it how. And you can say percent, you can call it whatever you want, percent. And then this is the formula for percentage. It's the number of people in the category about that over the total in both categories times 100. And so if you look over here within the satisfied group, we have 54.4% were male and 45.6% were female. If you add 54.4 and 45.6, you get 100% of the people in the satisfied category. A little more than half of them were male, a little less than half of them were female. In dissatisfied category, you have 50.5% that were male and 49.5% that were female in the dissatisfied category. So of everyone in the dissatisfied category, a little over half were male, a little under half were female. So now you have percentages that you can use. So that is how you create the percentages. Okay. Then you pipe it into ggplot. So let's look and see how that works. And I know we are 2 minutes over. I'm just going to keep going through this example. And then I'll stick around to take questions, or if anybody wants to work on any of the other stuff for a little while, I'm happy to stick around for like half hour or whatever. So for a grouped bar plot with percentages, you're going to take the data, pipe it into group by, like we just did, group by country satisfaction and sex, count how many people are in each grouping, group by country satisfaction, because that's what I want to add up to 100%. Pipe that into mutate to make the new variable that's the percentage, then drop any missing values, then finally pipe it into ggplot and do all of the stuff we've been doing until now. So you can see we've got country satisfaction on the x-axis. We've got this percentage variable that we created up here on the y-axis. We're going to fill it with the sex color. Going to add on. Notice I've changed it into column instead of bar. That's because I'm using summary data. So I'm using percentages that I created, that I calculated, instead of the raw number of people. So it's still a bar graph, but it's called column instead of bar. Position equals Dodge, puts those bars side by side. Labels, we've done that a bunch of times. Scale fill brewer, I used the paired color. Theme minimal, I got rid of that background. So you've now got percentage within each satisfaction group on the y-axis, satisfied or dissatisfied with how things are going, and participant sex. So in the satisfied group, there's a higher percentage of males than females. Also in the dissatisfied group, a higher percentage of males than females. But it's a much closer number. Okay, so I'm gonna stop with the teaching part there, but I am happy to stick around. And there are a bunch of other graph types if you want to hang out and try, like a histogram. There's some really great histograms you can make, box plots. Here's a rain cloud plot, so that's kind of cool. You can see the distribution of your data. And all of this code is in these slides and in the markdown document that you have. I'm happy to answer your questions here or on email. The very last slide of the day will show my email and my Twitter handle. I'm on email and Twitter like all the time. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer. And that's it for me. So if you need to leave, I know it's much later where you are than where I am. please feel free, but if you want to stick around, I can stay for half an hour and answer questions or help you through code. Yes, you can use R for regression analysis for sure. Here's the function is LM for a linear model, or GLM for a logistic. And you can just look those up in the help documentation, and it should show you. Let me see, I can go back and share my screen again. You can look those up in the help documentation with GLM, and it'll show you how to use it. They're usually at the bottom of the help documentation is a little bit of code. This one looks like they're trying to do too much, but you can also just Google doing logistic regression with GLM. Actually, I have an article you can have, which is free. Let's see if I can find it. Here you go. In the chat, I'm putting an article on how to do logistic regression in R. Thank you for coming. And I know that's a lot. I know it's a lot, especially for a weekend in the evening. But I am more than happy to help you if you are going to continue using R at all. Like Juliette said, she and I met like 4 times before she finally wanted to write some R code on her own, and then and the rest is history. Now she's getting scholarships to go to Paris and write code. So, and it's only been a year or 2. Yes, you can use R for multivariate analysis for sure. That article that I just posted, this one shows multivariate logistic regression. If you're talking about a multinomial or an ordinal logistic regression, you can do that. I have chapters on those in my book, or you can just Google how to do it and you'll find tutorials online. Data purging. I'm not sure if I know what that is, but I can look it up. Unit root tests. In R. Yeah, I haven't done it myself, but here is a tutorial on how to do it in R. Yes, principal components analysis can definitely be done in R. Let me see if I can find a resource for that. Let's see. Yeah, here's one. Here's principal components analysis in R. Prove a hypothesis. You can test a hypothesis. Yeah, so it depends on what your data are. I mean, if you're trying to prove a hypothesis and you need to use linear regression, you'd use the LM. You needed to use chi-squared or whatever. Yeah. So yes, it can definitely be used for hypothesis testing. Do you have a certain kind of hypothesis you're working with? Anything else? Anybody has questions? Here's some hypothesis testing tutorials. So next Thursday, if you all are interested here, I'm gonna actually turn off that recording.